Cold open question of the day, Brendon Kleen. We just hit the 10-year anniversary of Philip Seymour Hoffman's death. I think, speaking for you here, I think the collective favorite actor of the Just Basketball show. Among many other scenes in many movies over the course of a great career, he absolutely killed, being a horrible pickup basketball player in the rom-com Along Came Polly. Brendon, what's your favorite movie basketball scene of all time?
I wanted to come up with a creative, thoughtful, artsy answer or something here, but my answer is not any of those things. I actually am going to go with the initial discovery of the talent scene from Hustle from last year, where Juancho Hernan-Gomez looks really cool on a playground. I don't know if that's I didn't do detailed research. I wasn't, popping in DVDs over the weekend to get ready for this one, but that is what came to mind first as far as maybe a little bit outside the box, but still one that I really enjoyed.
Good answer.
It's basically like a Fast and the Furious race, but a basketball game, that scene. It's kind of bananas, but also very fun. And that's a good movie.
Brendon, mine is just the basketball scene from Along Came Polly, because it's so damn funny, and it's just so kind of ridiculous and human. And you could tell that Philip Seymour Hoffman, who was a wrestler in high school, has someone on a show I was listening to recently pointed out he's not really built to be a good basketball player. He's got really thick forearms and things. But this scene where he's just yelling, "Raindrop! White chocolate!" and then he calls for the timeout. It's incredible. It is the guy that you're really mad he's in your pickup game. When I was at a larger stage in my life, was this guy probably just in your pickup game that you don't want in your pickup game. It's incredible. The commitment to being awful, just downright horrendous, is honestly it's very human. It's just very grounded in reality in a way a lot of basketball scenes and movies. Looking at you, Jack Harlow, and you're using the wrong hand and you're with your stunt double. Not really grounded in reality most
human
of the time.
Is a funny way to put it. I mean, he's playing for laughs, right? I mean, he's being ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would hope there's not a ton of humans who are setting themselves up for failure to that degree, doing something that they're just flat out bad at. You could shoot hoops solo, maybe get yourself ready for the pickup game. There are undoubtedly people like him. I don't disagree with that, but I would hope few and far between, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I haven't been to enough playgrounds.
Also, the varying aversions to the really sweaty, hairy guy, a very real thing.
That is human.
Yeah, being I don't want to have to guard the big, hairy guy wearing goggles in the post and, take a stomach full of sweat to my face. That's very human on Ben Stiller's part. All right, coming up on today's show, not more about Along Came Polly and Jack Harlow and basketball movies. It's the NBA trade deadline. It is coming close. We've got a bunch of categories we're going to give out for this one, plus the latest in WNBA free agency. That's all coming up today on the Just Basketball Show. Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, follow us on your podcast platform of choice, 5 stars only, and hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. Check out Thrive Fantasy as well, one of our great partners. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL. Sign up today with our code JustBasketball, and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. Gotta say, tip a cap to me for a second. Don't like to do that. I feel uncomfortable even doing this. But our guy Colby Olson and I are doing daily prop videos during the week over on our TikTok page at Just B-Ball Fans. I got Domantas Sabonis under on points and rebounds as one of my props on Monday. Got it only by 0.5, but I hit that thing, and I'm pretty proud of myself for calling that one, Brendon. I got to say.
That's fair. Isn't it better to get it by a lot though? If you eke it out.
No, it's thrill. It's the thrill.
Got it.
It's just about the thrill. I'm here for a long time, or for a good time on that. Not a. I want to win and feel some exhilaration, and picking unders on guys who are just doing what Sabonis is doing, kind of like honestly a little risky. The math did not go in my favor in terms of historical data, but take that for data.
Really, just a homer pick, but that's conversation for a different day.
That kind of true, but I was right, so whatever. All right, WNBA free agency. Nneka Ogwumike is going to the Seattle Storm is where I think we have to start. Number one, Brendan, love that she just gets to go break this news to her sister on the worldwide leader in sports. I love that that's like how this kind of got rolled out, which is kind of funny. Mm-hmm. I thought her quote about how they're building the practice facility and they also just got Skylar Diggins-Smith. I felt like the way she talked about this to me was very, very smart, and I like this move for her as one of the stars of the league. I think someone that still has a lot left to provide the W, has a lot left to accomplish. I like that she's getting a fresh coat of paint on her career. I like the fact that she is choosing something new and chasing something new as opposed to just trying to stay in LA and stay where she would have just been very comfortable and could have probably stayed there forever and not been a big deal.
Yeah, look, it's a move back to the Pacific Northwest for her. She went to college at Stanford, so it always seemed like a decent option, I think. But I actually, you flexed on getting the Sabonis under. I will flex something a little different and more random. But coincidentally, happened to speak to Jonquel Jones today for
sick
an article at UpRocks, and asked her about Nneka moving. And I think, her perspective as somebody who left let's say, in the WNBA, it's not so much small market versus big market. It is more so franchises that are being invested in and franchises that are not. Franchises with deep-pocketed, committed ownership versus franchises that are being run like, Div 2 college programs. And Jonquel Jones did that last year. She left the Connecticut Sun, moved to the New York Liberty, was part of a super team, not unlike what Nneka just did. Both former WNBA MVPs, players who have played in the finals. And her perspective is as well as I can put it, which was even a player as great as Nneka, right? Somebody who is the president of the executive committee of the Players Association and somebody whose accolades I just listed there. Even she should, and in this case did, tell the franchise that did all of that alongside her what she was worth. And it's not just about money. It's not just about talent around you, but it's also, hey, I am somebody that helped build this organization into what it is. Why have you guys not followed suit? And I don't know how deeply like the hate for the Sparks necessarily runs. I'm not trying to build it in anything that it's not, but clearly on the other side of this, the Storm have done all those things. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we continue to see these super teams be built in places that have invested in the franchise. It's that simple right now in the WNBA. If you are that, you're going to get players. If you are not that, you will not get players.
I think, too, it tells you where the Sparks... I mean, what you just said I think is all correct. And I think tells us like what the Sparks kind of are right now. And this is... The Storm are obviously now the more interesting team for next season, I think, just with the talent they've added and everything like that and just their history. But what are even the Sparks now? They have a high draft pick. They signed Lexi Brown to a two-year extension. But like this team now just kind of also... This team doesn't exactly have an identity right now. This team doesn't exactly have anything you can really rest its merits on, and maybe that comes via them having the number 2 pick. Maybe Paige Beckers is the pick there, and that becomes, I guess, maybe it's Cameron Brink or something now. I don't know exactly where they're going to end up with that draft. They're going to in number 2 in the Caitlin Clark draft is somewhat of a tough place to be, even if there's a lot of great talent there, but. It speaks to the fact that the Storm, I think, Brendan, everything you said, even with Stewie leaving and Sue Bird retiring, they kept an identity to what that franchise is and what it's about. I don't know what the Sparks' identity is without like they now have to figure that out, even if they have infrastructure there and a named coach and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the more bizarre things in the WNBA, I think, whatever has been going on with the Sparks. They played in a convention center at one point. They hired Derek Fisher for God knows what reason a while back. They obviously had some level of drama with previous management. And they seem to be getting more stable with the owner being less involved. They now have a president permanently and a GM permanently that are not the owner. They have Kurt Miller as the coach, who is a well-respected guy that has been in deep postseason runs most of the time that he has been a head coach in the league. I think this is sort of just a reset. And, Nneka Ogwumike, as much as she meant, and I think as sort of much as you might have liked the idea of, hey, we can reset and keep her, that would have been maybe the win-win here. At age, what is she? Like, she's 33, going to be 34. It makes sense to say goodbye to that at a certain point. And so I think that they're just headed toward, hopefully some momentum upward with a younger type of rebuilding squad. And whether it's Paige Beckers or it is Cameron Brink or whoever they choose to draft, that will be the next Nneka Ogwumike for them. And somebody who can win MVPs and, take the team back to the finals like they were for a while there. But, it's kind of a bleak situation for them as things currently stand. It's just, kind of has to happen. And hopefully that next era can maybe bring on the investment that I think is way past due here, where they don't have a practice facility. They are like the fourth tenant at Crypto.com Arena and just don't really have the level of, like, you compare it to the Liberty, right? That building's rocking. And yes, it helps to have the ownership be the same of the Nets and the Liberty, but who cares? It's a huge city that loves basketball, and they show out for the WNBA team. There's no reason the Sparks can't have that.
100% agree. Last thing on this, are the Storm title contenders now?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they already had Jewel Lloyd. Skylar Diggins-Smith has played at a high level whenever she's been on the court. And, she's obviously a little older now, but she is only 33 herself. I would expect that to continue. They have young players around the roster on top of these veteran stars. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how they fill it out, but I don't know if they're up there with the Aces and Liberty. I don't know if the next team we're going to talk about is quite there, but we at least now have 4 bona fide threats, whereas last year we were struggling to find 3.
Speaking of the next thing, is in your backyard. The Phoenix Mercury have traded for Kalea Copper with the Chicago Sky. Gave up, among players, among picks, their 3rd overall pick in the upcoming 2024 draft. And Brendan, that's where I want to start with this. Is a trade for Copper, and I think I'm essentially saying, win now. We have a splashy head coach hire. We have Donna Taurasi still around, and much longer are we even going to have her? We have Griner. We have Brittany Griner around. We're the Phoenix Mercury. We don't, rebuild. We're not going to worry about retooling. We're saying, what can we do right now? Is this a smart move for the Mercury to pursue something for the present, as opposed to maybe using that pick on a Beckers, on a Cameron Brink, or someone of that ilk, and thinking a little more long term?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I'm not convinced Paige Beckers is leaving, personally, when you just think about her injury history, the fact that she is kind of finally just starting to get back to where she was, and the fact that I think most people would say, with how much injuries have once again struck that UConn roster, that I don't think that they're at the talent level of the rest of the top of women's college basketball right now, meaning they're facing an uphill battle to really make a deep run in the tournament this year. That would all lead me to believe, combined with one of the players who did get hurt for that team being her best friend, Azzi Fudd, I just sort of feel like she may come back. And So that means a draft where we thought, maybe it's a clear top 3 becomes a little muddied. And so I think that's part of this. But there's another couple of things, right? You mentioned Taurasi is on the final year of her contract. She is playing in the Olympics. Never thought we would see her. I didn't even think she'd play in the 2020 Olympics, Chris, and here she is. And then Brittany Griner.
Well, just to say, Diana Taurasi is 41 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's really old. She'll turn 42 August of next year. She'll be a 42-year-old player in the W next season.
Yep. And I think she'll retire. I think this is kind of it. Would be my assumption. But again, I've pretty much said that for the past 5 years, so don't listen to me. Brittany Griner's a free agent. They still need to re-sign her. But I think most people have assumed that will be a 1-year contract. Maybe that's different now that there is kind of an extension of this window with Natasha Cloud and Rebecca Allen also being signed for 2 years. Maybe Griner goes for 2. Regardless, they have all those things putting pressure on them to kind of win now. They also don't have their draft pick next year. So unless they drafted somebody at 3 in April that was good enough to elevate an aging Taurasi, Griner, who's still coming back to her physical prime, if she can get there, unless they got somebody so great to make them like fully good again, they were likely to have a really lost season where they're not an actual threat to win the championship, but they also don't get their draft pick. So I think it was sort of go one direction or the other. Fully tear down, which probably not going to happen with a new owner and those superstar legends on the team, or try to reboot as quickly as possible. So they went that route, and I mean, man, they really went that route, just like the Suns did with Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant. They now get Kalia Copper, a finals MVP who beat them 3 years ago now, and Natasha Cloud, a great role player, and Rebecca Allen, a great role player. So they'll be right there too, I think, with the previous team we talked about in Seattle, and then the 2 who faced off in the finals last October.
I'm right there with you. I am always a little hesitant on teams that are so in the now like this, and what is the upside? Because you could see this going wrong, I think, pretty easily just based on age and all of that. Like, you just could. And is the WNBA draft necessarily like, you just wouldn't see that? Part of the fun of the W, Brendan, is you don't really get this kind of trade in the NBA anymore. Teams just don't trade picks in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that we still get this. And to your point, there are some interesting players. If the Phoenix had kept this pick and Becker goes back, but like, are they a Cardoso team when they have Brittany Griner? Probably not. And like, then you're reaching for other things. Like, it gets tricky for them, I think, if you're looking at just like value in the boards.
Yeah,
it becomes a little dicey for them. It's not an easy place to be either when you have Taurasi. Like, I am all for teams. No. You have a legend like that, arguably the best player to ever play in the league, one of the defining 3 players in the league at worst, and she's on the back nine of recruit. You can't exactly say, like, hey, we're going to like draft a rookie that we don't know exactly how she fits with someone you've had a lot of success with. I don't know how you sell that to her, and then at that point, is she in? Or can you even like trade her? Like, it's very complicated, I think, just to navigate all of that.
Yeah, it's been where they've kind of been stuck for a while, and so I think it's pretty impressive to pull out of that and actually have stars around them. I didn't know if it would be possible, but they were able to pull it off because they were so bad last year. Now they turned that failure into a trade opportunity. And I think the good thing here is, again, to emphasize why these moves happen. Kalia Copper was thought to be off the board. She was supposed to be a free agent this offseason, but she extended like 3-4 months ago, toward the very, very end of the regular season last year. She signed an extension to stay in Chicago. And Neko Gumake, who we just talked about, and Skylar Diggins-Smith, I believe both of those players met with the Sky. They didn't want to go there. They have also had questionable leadership and inconsistent investment. Candace Parker went there, won a championship, and then pieced out immediately for some of those reasons. And now already Kalia Copper is like, well, if you guys can't actually pull off what you said you were going to pull off, I'm out too. But she's only 29. So I think no matter what happens in the future for the Mercury, whether they still have a little bit of a rocky road with saying goodbye to Diana or whatever happens with BG, and they're not that deep of a team. If both of those players were to leave next year, they're kind of scrambling a bit. There's no parity in the WNBA. It's very top and bottom heavy, so you can sort of fix things in a summer if you in an off season if you really need to. And I think they're just kind of betting on that. Our new core is Copper and Cloud, and then whatever else around that from there. And you could do a lot worse because we've talked about this with the NBA with our speed dating and stuff, Chris. I mean, I think I'm a big winner in this trade because we love Anthony Edwards on this show and players like that. Clea Copper is a match made in heaven if that is your style of basketball, and for me, the answer is it is, and I will be attending a lot of these games. They were such a bummer to watch, so W for Brendon.
Big W for Brendon. All right, last remaining WNBA story out there feels like it is Elena Deladon. That feels like kind of the big domino left to be figured out. And I did like a quick Google search before I said that, and the latest report was someone out of your neck of the woods reporting she wants to play for the Aces or the Mercury. And she's cored by the Mystics, so like I don't really know what's going on there. If I'm being honest.
She's not going to be able to play for the Aces. I mean, unless it's not going to happen. So the Mercury, this was their move. I think Copper is a better bet to make because of her much younger age and two-way ability, things like that. She just brings a two-way athleticism to this team that's desperately needed for what was an old team before this. I think they made the right call. And, not to get too in the weeds on some of the other stuff, but Connecticut brought back their 2 free agents, not leaving a lot of space for any sort of move to get Deladon. That was a team we had talked about for her because of the proximity. Feels like things are drying up. I'm not really sure what she's going to do at this point, and it sucks for her to have to, if she had to play a season on a kind of a tanking team or whatever, but there's only 12 teams and only like half of them want to win. So we'll see what happens.
Markets are going to market is where this ends up. All right, before we move on to discussing trade deadline awards in different categories, we're going to look at some big picture questions as well. I want to tell you our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that use vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use the link below, make your purchase, and support us here at the Just Basketball Show. They just dropped a new NBA collection of crew necks with different kind of crests that you should go check out if you're in the need of some NBA swag this winter. All kinds of great stuff at Homage. Check them out right now. All right, 10 awards we have here to preview the NBA trade deadline, Brendon. We got some big picture questions to start with first. Why don't we start there? Which one you came up with the big picture questions? I came up with the awards. That's how we broke down the labor here at the Just Basketball Show. Which big picture question do you want to start with first?
Yeah, let's start at the top, at the very top of the NBA, player-wise, talent-wise, individual-wise. I think what we've learned about the NBA the past couple years, and maybe this changes as we see the ramifications of the new CBA, but we're still in this era, I think, and I've called it like a trade and extension league. And what that tends to mean, if everything is so dependent on trades, is it's less so back when we were like, maybe growing up watching this stuff play out, Chris, of is X guy going to get traded as an expiring contract so that he can sign with the team that wants him? We used to see deals like that, Carmelo Anthony or wherever else you want to look, and that's kind of gone. Instead, it's really just a revolving door of anybody can be traded at any time, but when are they going to get traded? And sometimes the answer ends up being never because there's a new contract or an extension or it just they win and the problems go away. But doesn't seem like it's going to be Donovan Mitchell any time in the foreseeable future with how well Cleveland's playing. It doesn't feel like Karl Anthony Towns is on the table. I would even say the Warriors guys, Chris, are unlikely to be dealt, although there's some Klay Thompson noise persisting. I just kind of doubt that that's going to happen. So my question is, what star players might we be overlooking? Not for 2 days from now, but who are we forgetting about that may be traded sooner than we think, or we maybe thought could be a candidate to move at this deadline that we shouldn't forget about? Does anybody come to mind for you in that category of kind of these under-the-radar stars that could be the next Kevin Durant all of a sudden, or something like that?
It's hard to say because everything feels just a little settled right now, and I almost feel like we are waiting for the playoffs to happen before we can answer this. You could have said like Embiid pre-injury could have been that come the winter if things have gone bad there, but they were really good. Now he's hurt. Is Trae Young the answer? Like, is Trae Young kind of the only one, considering where the Hawks are at, considering I think his reputation has kind of sunk a little bit? If you look through the standings and you just look for name guys in the league right now, he feels like the one to me. There's not really one to me in the West. I think it's Trae Young. I think is where I would go with that.
Okay. I think it could be, but this goes back to the conversation we had last week about him as an all-star, and turns out he was a replacement. They announced that right before we hit record. Respect to Jared Allen. Free Jared Allen from NBA hell. Why did he not get in? Scotty Barnes and Trae Young over our guy Jarrett.
Yeah, and Porzingis. Porzingis also should feel aggrieved by not getting in.
But so okay, he's an all-star. But I threw it at you last week of has the league kind of passed over the Trae Young moment? Is that over in terms of fans, the league treating him like a centerpiece, teams thinking of him that way? I don't know how many teams are thinking, outside of the god-awful ones that would say yes to anything. I don't know how many teams are looking at their roster and their situation and thinking we're Trae Young on a max headed toward a super max away from what we want to be. I think that's why he doesn't get brought up. I think it's sort of settled to me that the Hawks are just going to revamp around him. And, they're going to trade Dejounte. We'll see what happens with like Bogdanovich or Capella or DeAndre Hunter, but kind of feels like they're just going to go into next season with like a roster that ideally makes a little more sense for Quinn Snyder, centered on Trae and Jalen Johnson. And I think it kind of feels like he's resigned to that too. I just don't think that noise is there because I'm not sure what the market would be.
Yeah, I guess the idea to me in answering that way is like sometimes there is no noise and it just kind of happens, like, and just takes one little trickle of noise. Did a name come to mind for you? If you don't, think
I
it's
have
Trae,
three.
Is there someone? Oh boy, okay, hit me.
Think I was going to ask a question and not have an answer to my own thing? That would be a bad prompt. I'd just be throwing you out to dry there.
So, I mean, look, sometimes I ask questions in part, like even on shows, and it's maybe not always the best podcasting, but I tend to want to ask questions that I sometimes am stumping myself with. So if you would have done that to me, I would have understood that.
So let's stay in the East for one. And this is not a surprise name by any means, but it's just one that, because of the nature of his team's season and his season, has just gone quiet a little bit. But it's sort of Karl Anthony Towns East to me, which is Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
Is Jaylen Brown on the Celtics to start next season, no matter what happens the rest of the way? If I just ask you that question and you can't say if they win the championship, throw that answer out. That's obvious. But if I just asked you and you take everything into consideration, do you think he's on the team next October 20th or whatever?
I kind of want to say no, just from like a pure money perspective. Just a pure what can we afford perspective.
Yeah, they have a player option for Drew Holiday that kicks in next year at $39.4 million. Jalen's contract kicks in at $52. Tatum is at $34.8. Porzingis $29. Derek White last year of his deal at $19.6. So maybe they can look at it and just say everybody's under contract through next season. Let's not panic, especially if they were to win the championship and it's sort of the run it back mentality because Horford is also expiring next season and maybe he retires after that. But I also think that there could just be some value in saying, like, especially if they maybe don't win the championship, hey, we're just going to flip Jalen into some other stuff and reset the team as like a Tatum, Porzingis, White centered group and go from there. So I just think we've kind of forgotten that this whole looming thing we all talked about before they came out and stomped everybody for the first half of this year isn't going away. Again, kind of like Cat. Paul George, why has he not signed his extension yet?
Yeah, that's a really great one, considering you kind of would have just thought he was just going to sign the extension once Kawhi did, and the comments he gave kind of led you to think they're just going to figure it out, and it was closer, and yet it's significantly after that, and it hasn't happened. So that's a good one. It just feels like hard for them to trade him as well, just considering like where they're
if
at.
they didn't sign him to an extension, he would be a free agent. Would be with the thing with him.
True. That's true.
Yeah. I just keep looking at his situation and how quick a lot of other people I hear are to extinguish Philly's cap space hopes. And I'm like, why don't we wait till he's signed on that dotted line before we say they don't have any targets? Because if he's available and he does enter free agency, I mean, I would call that a pretty damn good target for Philadelphia.
He'd be the one. All right, who's your third one?
This one is it might be actually a good one to segue us into the trade deadline stuff. And it's a player you threw at me a minute ago, last week. And I think I just extinguished it and said, no, there's no way. Anthony Simons.
Did I throw Anthony Simons at you? This is where we're at. It's just everything's
we talked about Portland. I don't know if it was last week, but definitely I think around Jeremy Grant and some of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And you were like, well, what about trading Simons? And I said, well, he's too good. But
yeah, this rings a bell. Yeah, okay. We're back. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he does still play the same position as two guys younger than him. And he's on an amazing contract. I wouldn't be selling, like, get rid of him just to, like, clear space for Scoot or something. But I would definitely be thinking long and hard about if I want to give him his next contract in a couple years and be wanting to get in front of that if the answer is I don't want to give him that contract.
I think, too, part of this with him, Brendan, is we're in a situation where I think, except Paul George because it's free agency part of it, I think you could see some of these trades, some of these hypotheticals be something that teams just say, can we wait till the draft? And that's been some of the reporting on Kuzma's and some of these other guys that are theoretically on the market. Some teams I think are just maybe saying, can I just wait until the summer and get better value? I think we're seeing that with some of this, and with Simons. Like, why are you in a rush to trade him now? Maybe not. George is kind of the one, and like obviously Boston is like not trading Jaylen Brown right now. Like can you imagine if they were tomorrow like, hey, we traded Jaylen Brown for just like some, you know what I mean?
That's exactly what I'm saying though. Is like this is not a why aren't these teams trading these guys list. Yeah. This is a don't forget about these guys as we're thinking about their teams right now, their teams heading into the offseason, their teams maybe adding other guys at this deadline. Because, again, it is also connected, right? Like Portland with Simons, who I just brought up. Brogdon has been making his own campaign to not get traded. Just telling everybody within earshot, I don't want to be going anywhere. Please don't send me anywhere. And it's like, great. And he's only under contract for one more year beyond this. But if I'm thinking of, well, do we want to re-sign Brogdon? Are we going to try to use cap space at any point? When is our team going to be ready to win? is Simons part of that, right? And so it's something to be thinking about. I don't think it ever was going to happen at this deadline, but it would not surprise me, like you just said, if it happened on draft night or in July sometime. My other big picture question is shorter.
Okay.
Has the NBA done what it needed to do in its mission, its goal, to weed out tanking?
So there's two ways to answer this. I think in terms of like optics and is there a team that is doing what the Sixers did in processing? The answer to that is no. So there's not a discourse and a headline stuff around it. Jake Fisher was just talking about this with Adam Mares and like they're over on their show. And
that was the inspiration for the question.
Okay. Look at us, hive mind. But they're still really shitty teams is the thing. It's just not. They're teams that are bad, and I think teams that are okay with being bad. And then there are the Pistons who I don't think want it to be this bad, but are this bad. So I think you've gotten rid of tanking in the way that it was defined by Sam Hinkie and the way it was operated by Sam Hinkie. But I don't think you've gotten rid of really bad teams that are actually okay with losing and biding their time to reset in some way.
Yeah. There's obviously still terrible teams, right? But that's natural. And I do think the optics are the part of it that is important. As we talk about these deadline possibilities, it's I mentioned Brogdon, Washington you mentioned with Kuzma, Detroit, still an open question if they're going to get rid of Burks or Bogdanovich. They, at some point, were talking about actually adding Zach LaVine rather than getting rid of anybody. And Charlotte, they got rid of Rozier. We'll see what happens with Hayward, although it sounds like he doesn't want to buy out. So we'll see.
Get that bag, Gordon. Keep just getting the checks. Get those bird rights, my guys. Smart
that's
stuff.
4 teams, right? And then San Antonio, who probably doesn't have a lot to sell, that don't want to bottom out, even what the Grizzlies have done and Toronto. There's no team that comes up on the schedule. The Wizards are just really hurt right now, so they've looked pretty awful. But there's really not a team on the schedule that you look at and you're like, oh, they're not even. They actually want us to beat them. You know what I mean? And for a while, I think when you and I were coming up, being around games and stuff, that was weekly. You would circle on whatever team you covered's calendar and be like, yeah, that's a win because it just. I mean, I covered one of those teams. that was the win on the calendar during Booker's early years in Phoenix. So they've moved on from that, and I think that really contributes to these deadlines now where nobody seems to be in a hurry to just tear down to the roots and just lose as much as possible. That's not really on anybody's list of goals anymore in the NBA, and I think that's part of why these role players don't move around as much. So that's why I wanted to throw it out before we get into some of these things, because if it does become a quiet-ish deadline after the various moves we've already had, I think that'll be a big reason why.
Let's get into our awards here. We're going to go back and forth. Some of these have these awards for both conferences, and then we have some big picture league-wide ones we'll finish with. Really one we'll finish with in that case. So, Brendan, player who needs a trade, Eastern Conference edition. I'm going to go first. I wanted this to be Zach LaVine because the Bulls had a damn team meeting the first night of the season, and they were trying to trade him for months, and then he gets hurt and his season's done, and howdy doody. So good job, Chicago Bulls. Thank you for just being the Chicago Bulls, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
My answer is Bruce Brown, which is not a very sexy star answer. But can we just get Bruce Brown to a team that's going to be in the playoffs and make some noise? That guy's a playoff 16-game player. All due respect to Toronto, let's just get him somewhere where he's going to play playoff basketball and actually kind of fulfill what he's supposed to be in the NBA.
My theory on Bruce Brown, I'm very happy that you brought him up. I did a TikTok about trade options for him when he first got to Toronto, and I had 40 ideas that I tried to shove in there. So apologies to anybody who follows us there. I didn't do my best work.
No.
But the main one that I wanted,
maximalist content, Brendan. You're a king. You're good.
The one that I wanted to highlight here is I have a hunch about Bruce Brown that and I watched this up close growing up in Phoenix with Steve Nash, where, like, shout out to the Knuckleheads podcast, but the pinnacle of Quentin Richardson's career was playing with Steve Nash. The pinnacle of, like, Marcin Gortat's career, Dwight Howard's backup in the finals, if you even remember who that is. Obviously played with the Wizards for a while too.
Polish Hammer.
Like, a lot of his best years were with Nash for a bit there at the beginning of his career. So I think Bruce Brown is just a, like, $20 million player next to Nikola Jokic, and that's it. I think that's kind of what he is. So I'm really skeptical of what he'll do. Like, he's putting up numbers. He's been fine in Indiana. Did you ever watch a Pacers game or look at a box score or go on, Twitter or Instagram the night after a game and be, like, wowed out of your mind about something Bruce Brown did this season? Not really. But you were thinking that when he played next to Joker. So I think he has to be in a very set circumstance to thrive. And I don't know where that is. I don't know if he'll end up somewhere where he makes a huge impact, honestly, unfortunately. But maybe he goes back to Denver this summer.
Yeah. Who's your answer for this in the East?
Kuzma.
So I have him in player who doesn't need a trade. So let's just talk about him. I just don't think the Wizards, like,
polar opposite about him.
Yeah. Yeah. After we would chalk on All-Stars.
Yeah. Well, why don't you think he needs a trade? You like him just destroying his prime in a team that is, like, the worst watch in the NBA in Washington?
Look, I'm just a little bit of Kuzma skeptical that he can go and, like, midseason just, like, rewire himself and, like, be, like, a higher paid version of Dorian Finney-Smith on a title contender. Like, I just don't know if that guy is, like, 100% just there to figure that out. I'm a little skeptical of that. I also just think you can figure this out in the summer and do a kind of a more natural reset with him, and trading him now, I just let him do his thing for, like, 6 more months. It's fine. I didn't have, like, a great answer for this in the East as part of this, and I'm just not particularly moved by Kyle Kuzma in one way or the other. In the way that, like, Bruce Brown, I am interested in. Dorian Finney-Smith, I am interested. I could have picked him for our last question and put him in, just say, let's get him to a contender. Like, that guy should just be on a better team than he is. Kuzma right now, I just don't know exactly how I feel about him as a guy that's going to scale up in that way. Even though, like, he, I think, could be more. It's just the habits the last couple of years is not a one-to-one translation, him playing for Philly or whatever team might go get him.
Well, I think to your point, it probably is more like scaling down than scaling up, right? It's like just, but I guess to me, it's like he really was for the first I would say 5 years of his career, kind of was that type of role player, and it's only been the past 2 that he's upped his jack and shot stuff up to a ridiculous level. So I guess I trust it, if it was Dallas, if it was, I don't love it in Sacramento, but I could see it, places like that. I think he could just become a shooter, a cutter, a second unit scorer, guard up, like, not the best guy on the opposing team, but maybe the second best, and you feel decent about it. He's huge. He can rebound, but yeah, I don't think it's somebody who would have, like, if the Mavs did get him, that I'm going to be like, they're the favorites. He's not that type of guy, but
Dallas is the one that you could, like, slide him in, though, and it would just, like, the structure of the team doesn't allow freelancing because of Luka and Kyrie. Like, he just, like, Kuzma, you do this, and there's not many other situations that would fit him better than that if you wanted him just to be a very specific thing.
Player who doesn't need to trade in the East, I have Jaden Ivey.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Don't get rid of Jaden Ivey. Detroit Pistons. Good. I think that no matter how high or low you might have been on him, draft night 2023 or even at Purdue, we always knew he was going to be a project. We always knew that, his decision-making, his just getting anything from him defensively in that frame at that size is a big ask. His jump shot, of course, was an open question. But I look now, and he's shooting 53% from 2. His turnover rate is down from 17 to 15 this year. while his usage has stayed pretty steady, his true shooting percentage, because of that efficiency from 2, is basically league average. His defensive, impact stats are awful. That's fine. They've been awful, so I don't expect anything different. But I don't look at this and feel nervous about it. And I think if you were to trade him now, it would be trading incredibly low from a team standpoint, from him being out of the rotation for so long standpoint and tanking his value. If I'm trading Jaden Ivey, it's to get somebody that's pretty damn good next to Cade Cunningham, not just to say I want Zach LaVine or let me clear the guard rotation out or whatever nonsense they would do. So it doesn't sound like they're going to trade him. I'm not saying that that's like on the table, but I'm glad it's not, because it felt like a couple months ago it might have been.
I did enjoy, Brendan, that we did during all of this, get a Killian Hayes wants out bit of slop.
We also got a Monty Williams axe to trade that was pretty much agreed to get Killian out of Detroit before the season even started last summer.
Cool.
So glad that all worked out for everybody, and now he wants out anyway, and he's not playing minutes. Very foreseeable. He is not on my doesn't need a trade list. I actually would not make any lists because he's an inconsequential guy that for some reason was starting games during a big losing streak for the worst team in the NBA. Very, very strange roller coaster ride. Who's your East team that needs a trade?
So Philly was my pick. So I want to preface that. Philly was my pick because you had an opportunity. You had Embiid playing at this monster level. Maxi's legit. You have the assets to do it. Just go do it. You can never take Embiid for granted how long he's going to be healthy. And then Joel Embiid gets hurt, and I'm having a hard time reconciling some of the Philly stuff, which we can talk about if we want to. But I'm having a hard time deciding, okay, is he going to miss a month? Is he reevaluated in the month? There's a lot of mystery still about what this injury is going to look like for him. Is it even my real thought is, Brendan, is it even in Embiid's best interest to play again this year for the long-term health of his career, considering this is another injury? These are all things that I, as not a doctor, am not qualified to answer, but are racking through my brain as I'm thinking about Philly. I wanted to say the 76ers. They'd have changed my answer to the Orlando Magic, who I just want to go get some kind of competent veteran guard to just do something for them. Maybe do something with the Wendell Carter Jr. salary, which has been kind of speculated a lot about with them and reported a lot about for them. I just think they considering their slide from as high as number 2 in the East to where they are now, I think they just need something else in there to make life easier for Paolo, make life easier for Franz, and just kind of stabilize what that team is. Miami's already made a trade. You could argue them as well, I think, just considering they feel kind of weird. But I wanted to say Philly. My answer here is Orlando.
I love this. I have Orlando as the team that does not need to make a trade in the East.
Oh my God! Look at us.
And it's kind of similar. It's kind of similar to the Kuzma thing you said. I just think integrating. You're not talking about okay, if they made a trade to get a shooter, I don't even know who that would be. Another Gary Harris type. I'm not going to argue with that. Whatever. Jake Fisher had it listed as they wouldn't go out of their way to get somebody even as good as Kevin Huerter. So doesn't sound like they're interested in that. But if they did something like that, of course I'm fine with it. The problem that I have with the Magic is what they need is probably the hardest single thing to integrate into a team. Yeah. Something that even if you have a training camp, doesn't get ironed out even in time for opening night for a lot of teams. So a point guard, and you've heard Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry and whatever, that's a lot to ask of everybody involved to make that guy make sense for the 2 months we have left in the season, let alone to even be, a positive impact come playoff time, really shepherding your offense along. So I'm kind of with them where a lot of other people seem to be with the Thunder, where I'm yeah, it sucks that Franz had the injury. You don't have the advantage in the standings. You might have to fight through the play-in and whatever. But I just want to see what that all looks like. They have a core, that so take what happens in the playoffs, learn from it. Decide if Fultz is somebody you want to re-sign long-term. Decide what Cole Anthony's role is for you. See if Anthony Black is anything. Maybe play him in another summer league and have another camp with him and see what that all looks like. And then you can make a more educated decision, but panicking into getting somebody just to have it feels like it wouldn't even pay off as much as we think because of how little time they would have to gel.
I think that's right. I think I want them to buy long term, but the market might just not be there. I just think that team in general just like needs something different long term, and maybe if you could buy it now, but to your point, that's kind of hard to buy and integrate right now and kind of save your season. And I don't think I framed that correctly when I talked about it. So who's your team that needs a trade most?
The Hawks.
Yeah, this is the one that I just, it felt so obvious. I wanted to be a little bit of a hipster and like not say the Hawks because it just feels like they're going to make like, if any team's going to make multiple trades on Thursday, it feels like it's going to be Atlanta.
But what's crazy is, and the reason that I did just go ahead and pull the trigger and say them, even though they're obvious somewhat, is they've been playing not terribly lately. And so, I mean, they're terrible on defense, but we know that. But they're 5-5 in their last 10, nothing to write home about. But they beat the Suns. They were competitive with the Clippers. They had another win in there. Did they beat Boston? Somebody else recently. And over the last 2 weeks, they have the best offense in the NBA by it's them and the Clippers kind of head to head, and then there's a big gap to 3. So you look at that, plus the fact that they're 10th in the East, and I would expect Brooklyn to get a little worse at the deadline. Maybe Chicago does too. Hey, we could get to 6, 7, not 6. We could get to 7 or 8. Host a play-in game like we did last year and see what happens. Like I think that could convince them to just do it. But I think the ultimate destiny of this team, as I mentioned when we talked about trade at the beginning, Chris, is something with more athleticism around Trey. And it was actually making me think, not to get on too big of a Hawks tangent, but if they had just nailed the DeAndre Hunter pick, if he had just hit his ceiling, how differently we would feel about this team. Imagine if they had like the peak of what we thought DeAndre Hunter could be ahead of that draft when he was at Virginia, plus Jalen Johnson now. Like, that's the Trae Young team, but they don't have that. So I think the best thing to do is to try to flip whatever you can to find what that version of your roster can look like, because offensively, he's the real deal, and he's going to be good enough to give you a shot at a playoff spot no matter what. But you got to do better on the rest of the roster, obviously, because they're 6 games below 500.
Dejounte Murray getting traded, do you think? Yes or no?
He's been shooting the ball so damn well. I kind of feel like the Lakers probably put a pretty damn good offer on the table, would be my guess. I think that they feel enough pressure that they say, whatever we were saying no to before, we now say yes to. I don't know if that includes Reeves, probably not, but everything short of that, Christie or whatever else hold up might have been. And then at that point, it's just, is Atlanta going to say yes? What do you think?
I think yes. I also just like want one more name trade. I just want one more kind of seismic adjustment in the league. And if Zach LaVine can't get traded, let's just get the other guy who's been in 8 bajillion rumors in the last 2 months.
And is better.
And is better. Also clutch though. So your team that does need a trade is the Orlando Magic. Brandon, mine's the Cleveland Cavaliers. What are they going to get with the salary? Like, this is both a practical thing because I don't really know what they can trade that is exactly going to improve them in a real way.
Yeah. But
like, this team's just playing really good basketball. As good of basketball as they've historically played without LeBron in the last 20 years to start the year. They're they enter as we're recording, it's enter Tuesday's slate of games, second in the East. They got Mobley back. He hit 3 threes against the Spurs. He's looked awesome in the first couple games back and been very aggressive. Garland's going to take a little more time to round out, I think, but Okoro's playing really well as a two-way wing. You're getting enough from LeVert, and I don't know what you're even getting for flipping LeVert. Like, if you're going to tell me you could trade LeVert for a better fitting wing, I would do it. But I don't know if you're going to get Dorian Finney-Smith for LeVert in some seconds. It seems like it's going to be a first for DFS if he's going to get moved at this deadline based on all the reporting. I just don't see a glaring need for the team. Even backup guard, which is one of the things they've been linked to as getting the trade. This team doesn't have room in the rotation for a backup guard, and if you need depth, Craig Porter Jr. just convert him to a real contract and you're fine. And I think that's like good enough for considering you have luxury tax concerns and all of that to kind of manage as well.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get anything. So I think that's why they don't make a deal. I just think they're definitely a summer team.
Do they need to make a trade? Is there any kind of trade that, like, need that you think they could address right now if they were going to make a deal?
No, because anything that they're at a point with how their roster is built that anything that they could do that you would convince yourself would make them substantially better, it would be a massive shift for what their roster is, and that's not going to happen in February of a season where you're a top team in your conference. So, no, could you potentially rejigger the roster to where whatever it's going to look like when Mobley is at center and you get something for Allen that helps you build that type of a roster? Yeah, that's not going to happen tomorrow. So that's my take on them, is just like, no. Are you going to get something for Dean Wade or even LeVert? I don't even think the trade you said would, okay, they have Dorian Finney-Smith now. I don't think that changes much either. So no, I think this has been an awesome season for them, and the rest of the way is going to be, can they get the two guys who were hurt back up to full health in time for the playoffs and maybe prove themselves to be a little more ready for that moment than they were last year, and that would be a success for them, So West, I have some takes.
Let's go.
I have some takes here. They're a little spicier than the East.
Okay, so let's go to Team West who needs to trade the most. Who's your? Let's go player. Sorry, let's start with player to keep it congruent. Using math words here, Brendan. Who's the player in the West that most needs a trade?
Jalen Green.
I love this. I love the spice here, and this has been percolating in all kinds of columns. You can read about the Jalen Green situation a bunch of places. Make the case.
So, it's multi-pronged. Rockets fans read us for filth for the segment we did on them last week. I don't know if you checked the YouTube comments. They think we're idiots. I will
honestly
say,
worst. I'm not gonna. This is gonna probably make them more mad at me. I think they're the Rockets fans, the most obnoxious fan base on the internet.
I want to get in good with Rockets fans because they're like my little fascination.
You and Eric Adams just really want to like bend fences with the Turkish government is what I think you want to do.
Oh, sure. No, so, okay, it's a few things. We talked last week about them skipping steps. I've been on that all season. I think that they already did and seem to continue to want to do that. The Mikal Bridges stuff makes more sense when you consider what I'm not sure has ever been concretely reported, but the assumption of the picks being given actually just being the Nets picks back to them.
Yeah.
It makes more sense that way. I'm not actually sure. Like, I don't know how close that ever got, but if that was it, okay. Mea culpa. I'm sorry. I am an idiot about the Rockets. That all being said, I think Jalen Green should get traded for their version of a Michael Carter-Williams trade. Not to get a superstar. That's the specific context that I think Jalen Green should get traded for. Sam Hinkie, fresh off of MCW winning Rookie of the Year, trades him for another set of future stuff to keep the rebuild going. That's sort of what I would do if I'm Houston. Continue to replenish your assets, get stuff for when you do make that star trade, but you're not ready for it yet. The reason I think the time is right to do that, though, is that I think Cam Whitmore is the real fucking deal. I think that guy is very, very, very good. And, like, if I'm Houston, he might just be what I thought Jalen Green was. And I want to know that sooner than later, especially if I can sell a little high on Jalen Green, relatively. We don't know. It could be low, could be high. I think it might be high.
Who is extension eligible in the summer? Who will be rookie extension eligible in a few months? You gotta
exactly.
It's gonna forces your hand a little bit.
You gotta know something about him and make a decision about him sooner than later. So all that kind of just adds up to, I would absolutely listen to offers from maybe bad teams or middle teams centered on young players and picks and add even more to my stockpile while clearing some space for guys like Whitmore, and then Thompson, whoever I draft this year and beyond. That's where I would do it. But I'm not saying to trade Jalen Green for Donovan Mitchell or something. I don't think they should do that.
Do you have a fit you like for Jalen Green if he were to get moved?
Anywhere. I mean, I think his skill set, if it hits, is valuable anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't mind him in Toronto. I wouldn't mind him. Toronto. Utah. Utah seems to be in on a lot of different upside guys. Throw him with the Jazz.
Danny Ainge is so back being linked to like everybody right now. He's so back.
Let the Jazz almost trade for him.
Yeah, it'd be great. All right, I love this take. This is better. Yours is better than mine. I went Andrew Wiggins.
Okay.
I just think Andrew Wiggins might need a reset again to kind of rebuild his career a little bit. It just something is off with him there. I know he's been through a lot, but something is not quite right with that Warriors team. You could try to talk me into the Clay thing. I just would rather see. Trading Clay just does not feel right to me. I feel like Wiggins is kind of the guy you trade, you reset, you get some more movable pieces, and he can try to restart somewhere else and figure out what the next phase of his career post Golden State is going to look like. So my answer is Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, Andrew Wiggins' middle name needs a career reset. So
I don't
think Golden State is the problem. Would be my thing with Mr. Wiggins.
I would agree. Remember when the Wolves were their core was Levine, Wiggins, and Karl Towns? What a time!
Another W for the Wolves front office. Made the right call.
Yeah, gotta just say, fans, whatever team you're a fan of, you're probably being overpressured by your young guys is ultimately the case, even though it's fun. It's just ultimately you might be like a little higher than they need to be. All right, player who doesn't need a trade. So mine's Marcus Smart because he's been like linked to like the Lakers and like we here on this show have speculated a little bit about should they try to move on from him and get some value back from him now. I just think they can probably try to flip Kennard if they need to move someone and Marcus is hurt. Run him back for next year and have him be the guy you want him to be when you try to really go for it next year when everyone's healthy, presumably. I don't think there's a need to like flip Marcus Smart at this deadline if I'm the Memphis Grizzlies.
Is he he's out 6 weeks from January 11th. So yeah, I guess he will play this season.
Bummer he couldn't play in his return to Boston because I know he got the video. It just would have been cool to see him like do Marcus Smart shit and like really pissing off the Celtic crowd probably.
Yeah, there was some reporting this week about I think it was from Jake Fisher that the Dorian Finney-Smith rumors about multiple first-round picks and whatnot was coming from last summer when maybe Memphis wanted to do something like that. And to me, that actually indicates just how much they value Smart. That they really seem to do their homework. We know they pursued McHale. And if they like him that much, I don't see a way that they're dumping him without ever even seeing him alongside their best guys. So I've just been thinking he's a Grizzly till next year, unless something really huge comes across where they just kind of have to do it. I don't think they're in any hurry to dump him. But we did discuss it, so it's a good one to circle back on. I'm not sure if they'll do any trades. Like even I think I saw they're uncertain if they want to get rid of Xavier Tillman. It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's quite weird.
Get some assets, Mine is Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
The more we hear, and I know it's Danny Ainge, and we'll be doing this, and we will become the Joker over time, convincing ourselves that the Jazz are actually pursuing these players that they are not. But even entertaining the fact of certain trades, which they at least seem to have done with Dejounte, with Drew Holiday, with Damian Lillard, and the fact that they've refused to tear down, that tells me that they're not tanking. They're not bottoming out. And if that's the case, there's no reason to trade a perfectly good player like Markkanen. It sounds like they want to renegotiate and extend with him is like the current kind of consensus among these insidery people. And I would think they could probably get a good price for him because they were the place that he rejuvenated his career. You see a lot of guys kind of take a discount there in those situations. So if they can do that, get him at less than a max, and he keeps playing as well as he has, like, why would you want to get rid of a guy like that if your goal is to be competent, if not win? That'd be actually kind of dumb. They have plenty of assets. What do they need, a couple more picks for?
That's a great point. All right, team that needs a trade the most, Brendan. To me, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just get another guard who can dribble and run an offense that isn't Mike Conley. Your team is crying out for it every time you watch them. It is hurting Anthony Edwards, Kyle Anderson, and some assets to go get another guard. It's just like the most obvious trade that is staring down, whether it's DeLon Wright, whether it's Tyus Jones and bringing him back. That's probably the one I like the most. Just go get a damn point guard and stabilize your season to some degree. It's just staring them in the face to just do that trade, and I think they desperately need it if they want to kind of hold on to some kind of positive seeding within the West.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know who that's going to be. I'm a little nervous about Minnesota. I think that they might be stuck with who they have, and that's fine.
D'Lo
They're
back?
very good. For whom? I don't know what they just don't have a lot to trade. It's really like it's just Kyle Anderson.
Yeah.
I think even Alexander Walker is too valuable. He's as far as smaller guys, I think he's a better point of attack defender than Ant is. So it's hard. I don't know if they can get it across the finish line. I have the Mavericks.
It's a good one.
I think it's pretty obvious. We talked about it with Kuzma. It sounds like they continue to be in on PJ Washington. Just somebody at that spot, especially, with the way that the Grant Williams thing has just not worked out for them. I think when Exum and Lively and Derek Jones are healthy, that team is getting pretty close to what Dallas was in 2022 when Bullock and Finney-Smith were at their peaks together. But that's still not enough. And if I was able to get somebody who could bring a little size, hopefully contribute a little bit to the team defense, and be a guy who can score a bit and fill it up when Luka, so that Luka doesn't have to do so much, or when Luka and Kyrie are hurt, which they both have from time to time, that would go a long way. But that's kind of an open secret. That's not exactly my hottest take here.
PJ Washington should have been on my list probably should have been my pick for a guy that needs a trade in the East, because I just think that guy is too good to be on that team, and I think can actually just be like a really good player in the East.
Charlotte makes everybody besides Brandon Miller look like 3 times worse than they are, I think. Brandon Miller's filling it up, but everybody else, it's like, why are they just substantially less good than we thought they would be? Whether, you know what I mean? Like LaMelo and Bridges and PJ Washington, it's like, please somebody save the Hornets. And in the meantime, get everybody out of there that they possibly could get out of there.
Brandon Miller doing some stuff of late, which is pretty fun.
Team that does not need a trade for me, New Orleans Pelicans.
Okay.
I am ready to see. We have never seen this team in the playoffs with Ingram and Zion. We didn't even see them in the play-in game together last year because Zion was not healthy for that. And right now, I mean, they're both healthy. That's not going to change in between now and the deadline. If you have a chance to see that, you just have to see it through. And any of their other trade options are just so complicated because of how much money and how fundamental. I mean, their 2 biggest trade chips, right, from a salary standpoint, are both starters, Valanciunas and McCollum. And it's like that would just be such a huge disruption to your team that I don't think it's worth it. And then the rest of their guys, I guess Nance, but he is a pretty valuable type of guy. Everybody else besides him is cheap and really raw. So you don't want to trade too early on any of those dudes unless you're getting a big star. So it just doesn't feel like there's anything really to be done. And when you look at the chance to say, wow, this whole fucking experiment we've been doing for 5 years since we got rid of Anthony Davis, we finally get to actually test it. Like, I'd be excited about that. And maybe it doesn't go great, but you at least finally get answers to the questions you've been asking yourself about your team if you're a fan or you work there or whatever for literally a half a decade. So I think that's the most important thing going on in New Orleans, not getting like another bench point guard or whatever they could get.
Yeah, let's figure out what you have, and then I think reassess in the summer and pick a direction in some way, shape, or form. I think feels like the move there, unless you have injuries again, and then it's just like I don't even know what to tell you to do there. Mine's the Nuggets. Like, yes, could they make upgrades on the edges and get another guard and whatever, and get like another wing or something? Sure. And I think like trading for depth can be underrated in the league at times. It's like if Boston makes a move to like slightly upgrade their depth, I think that could be good business for them. Denver in the same category. But do they really need one? Like, is that really is getting like a 10th man option or an 8th man option really going to make me feel that much better about them? It is not. They are who they are. And if Murray stays healthy and Jokic is Jokic, that team has a very good chance of making the NBA Finals.
Yeah, to me the thing is though, like even the depth point with them, it's like they're choosing not to play their guys.
Yeah,
it's not like they have injuries or they have just these like black hole young guys who we know suck. Their roster is fine. Their roster, I think anybody, Chanchar's hurt. Besides him, if even like Zeke Naji or Justin Holiday had to play 12 minutes in a playoff game, like they could still win it as long as the rest of the roster is healthy. So yeah, I don't think they need to do anything, and they still terrify me. They're still my pick to win this whole damn thing. So we're in lockstep there. We have one more category.
Biggest unknown.
Oh
yeah,
biggest unknown. I don't think I saw that.
This is on the Brendan. This is on the yellow legal pad I sent you.
Okay, you go first then.
There's only one answer to this to me. It's the Oklahoma City Thunder, and if you answer any other team differently, then like you could find a morsel of information about every other fucking team in the NBA. Find me one credible piece of information about what the Thunder are thinking or they're doing.
Yeah.
And it will be like the first one that we've seen that gives me any concrete idea of like what they actually are thinking about doing or what moves they could make or anything. It's just like they could do anything because they have all these picks and they're really good and they have a star player in Shea and Chet's been awesome. They could just do nothing and it would be fine. They could make a medium train and it would be fine. They could do something really bold that we don't see coming. They could be the team that just throws all their chips on the table and does something really aggressive. But we have no idea. Absolutely no idea, I think, in about like what they're actually thinking about where they're at right now. It is the most locked down team in the league as far as this stuff kind of goes.
Yeah, it's been that way forever, right? And I just think this is something I wanted to bring up with the tanking, but I didn't want to make that too long, and I won't make this too long either. But any of these teams that own future draft picks out the wazoo are the biggest unknowns. And the Thunder being both that and one of the best teams in the NBA makes them just obviously a huge wild card. But you could expand that to include, Brooklyn or Utah or Houston, or I think the Wizards will be on their way to being that type of team before long, having a lot of future picks and, others to come. That is always going to be a complete trump card in anything. So whenever those teams want to move, they're going to be able to outbid all the other teams. It's just always this waiting game of when and how they're going to utilize those assets. But they can't make all these picks. We all know that. So at some point, they got to pull the trigger on something, whether that's a huge move or a bunch of incremental stuff. We'll see. I don't have a different answer. That was just an expansion of yours. I do have an answer for the team that can become a contender with the trade.
I think there are 3 ways you could answer this. Okay. There are 2 team answers I think are acceptable, and I think there's an answer of is there actually any team that is actually capable of this? And that's my default answer because, Brendan, I don't think there's like we did a show about like lessons of past trade deadlines. It's exceedingly rare to get a trade that actually like helps a team upgrade and like you can take X player led to a title. It's just very rare and very hard to do that kind of trade. Like, there's not a Marc Gasol to Toronto trade like staring us down in the market. I don't think that player is either going to get traded or is necessarily even available. So my answer is maybe no, that like a team gets into that upper ring via trade. I think there are teams.
I mean, the answer might be James Harden and the Clippers, right? It already happened.
That's a much better answer than me babbling here for a second. The other way you can answer this is to say the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks could both make trades that upgrade their depth and get a better sixth man or something. There's a certain name been linked to both teams that is who's a good player but is entirely uncomfortable to trade for. There's a reason he's available in this context that would make both teams better, but would be uncomfortable in Miles Bridges. But both those teams could go get better pieces here and actually upgrade their rotation at low costs, and I think come out as like a better shot to push in that upper echelon than they would be right now. Those are the two team answers for me. Philly's off the board just because of the Embiid situation.
Yeah, and I think Philly was still a lower ring contender even without making a move. If you were to tell me everything was rocking as much as it was, I know I've been big on the they need to make one to really be there, but to me it's the Suns. I think the Bucks can win a championship without a trade. I'm not sure if the Suns can. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe they're both kind of in the same category. Maybe that's not fair. But I guess just the Suns specifically, it's like, okay, how many guys do the Bucks have? Let's just finish the show out with this quick thought experiment. I would say rotation guys that I think could survive in a playoff game. They have Giannis, Dame, Middleton, Brook. If things stay the same as they are, I would say Portis, Connaughton, and Crowder.
But even Connaughton's been like phased away in a weird way. Like he's not Pat Connaughton from the title team necessarily.
Yeah, that feels overblown to me. I don't know why he's not aggressive scoring, and that confuses me. Just you look at the box score, you watch these games, he like just doesn't take shots. But defensively, I think he's fine. I don't know. Maybe that I don't watch every Milwaukee game, but to me, I think it's fine. I don't know. 8. Let's just say 8. I think the Suns have 6. So that's why I pick Phoenix. And it's the big three, Nurkic, Allen, and Gordon. And I literally wouldn't say they have a single trustworthy player beyond that on their roster right now. They need to get at least one guy, either via trade or at the deadline, for them to even survive. What did I say? Trade or at the deadline?
You said at the deadline. Yeah, same thing.
I meant the buyout deadline, in March. To have a shot, because even just from like a wear and tear standpoint, a fouls in a random playoff game standpoint, you just can't win 4 playoff rounds with 6 players. So they need something much more than I think any other team, and maybe that's just going to be their destiny. Is they're never really going to get to that echelon of top tier title teams, and they'll just run up against somebody who is and get knocked out. But if they can even get 1 or 2 guys, I think we'd feel a lot better about them.
I think that's more than fair. We're going to end there. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. We'll be back with you after the deadline on Thursday. We'll see if any deals come through, any big deals. We'll react to the whole thing, give out some grades, all that and more come Thursday. Maybe we'll get some Elena Deladon news as well between now and then. Check out our friends at Thrive Fantasy. Code JustBasketball, $250 deposit match, and use our link to support our friends at Homage. Back at you Thursday. Enjoy the hoops.